right, so first of all, I got to ask you, and we've talked a million times, and you've been in your place in Chicago, and I've never even asked, like, all the guitars, the piano, like, are you musically inclined, or is this just like memorabilia, or is it just for effect? Because if it is, respect.
Well, I wish I could rip a guitar like I kick a field goal, that's for sure. But I grew up playing the drums. I played the trumpet for a little bit. I was in the band in high school. But the guitars behind me are collector's items. So we have anything from Kelly Pickler to Phil Mickelson and the Masters to Brad Paisley, Alice
Wow.
Cooper, Maroon 5. And then the piano is something my wife and the kids, they start when they're 7 years old, basically, is what happens. So when I'm done playing football and I want to pick up another hobby, especially here in Chicago in the winter, I might learn how to play the piano. I can't sing, so that'll be
Yeah.
the closest I can get to music.
All right. So of all those guys you just riffed off there that you've played with or been to shows, who I'm assuming Darius is the best golfer.
Yeah, I mean, Derek's a really
I
good
mean, obviously
golfer.
Phil, but I mean,
Yeah, I
outside of
mean,
Phil.
as far as non-professional. By the way, I'm gonna go see Phil here down at the Greenbrier. Hopefully, he plays pretty well in the Live Golf event. So I'm excited about that this week. Maybe he'll give me some tips on chipping because that's a weak part of my game. But
There's no
yeah,
weak part of
there's.
your game.
Oh, I'm close, Trey. I'm getting close, buddy. I shot 74 yesterday with two doubles. It's coming. It's coming.
There you go.
So hopefully I can get it down to scratch. I'd love that.
Well, I
But
played
yeah, the
with Phil.
best.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the
Go ahead.
best golfer is probably Darius, and then my favorite guitar on the wall is Brad Paisley, dear friend of mine and a buddy of mine, and I've gotten to know him through friends, and what an awesome artist and great human being.
Well, first of all, his song "Alcohol" might be the truest song ever written. So I saw him in concert a few years ago. Please tell him and say hi to Phil. I played with him at the Pro Am at Kapalua in 2022.
Nice, I will.
Right before things went a little bonkers.
How about this?
Right
Did
before.
you know that the Live Golf events are all shotgun events?
Yes, I did.
I did not know that. I just found that out this week. I was completely taken off guard that they all start at the same time. Then there's a huge party on Friday night, and it's kind of a whole thing. So I'm looking forward to
Yeah.
see how they put on the production.
Yeah. I think party is a big part of the branding there,
Eh,
without question.
It looks like
So
they're working. I think they're going to do something here in Chicago at the end of the month at Rich Harbors where they have a huge waste management type of hole, I think, which will be
nice.
fun for everybody, especially as a spectator.
Yeah. So, like you said, you're getting your kids ready for flag football these days, but you are not yet with a team. Are you surprised that you haven't been signed yet?
I'm not really surprised. I think, it's just part of the process, as this whole free agency thing has gone on, from the start of what my dream wish list was to, what my dream wish list now is. I've had a lot of time to, obviously entertain deals, have conversations with people. The further this goes on, the better chance I have at making the best decision for me to make the Hall of Fame. And ultimately,
Yeah.
that's one of my goals, or at least be in the conversation of that. And, I'm one season away from maybe being in the top five of all time in scoring in the National Football League. I'm 49 points away from 2,000 points. So there's a lot for me to play for, but I also know that the price has to be right for me to play. And we just haven't found that right team yet that's willing to pay a respectable number, and a team that I think can win a Super Bowl.
Well, that's interesting because we're not talking about a guy who was just a good kicker. We're talking about a guy who is, I think, still in the top five accuracy. I mean,
Eight,
forget like
eight,
top five
yeah.
scoring. You're top eight all time in accuracy. You've never missed a kick in postseason. Like, to me, that doesn't get talked about enough when people talk about you. Never missed a PAT, never missed a field goal. And there were a lot of times in San Francisco where you had to kick field goals instead of PATs, and you haven't missed one. There's been a lot of conversation this summer about running back contracts
Hmm.
and, why aren't they valued and why aren't they this? And, I understand all of that, but I also understand the economics of the position, which is eventually somebody's going to get hurt. Yet here you are, top eight all time in accuracy, going to be top five if you play this year, which I think you will, in scoring, and have never missed a kick. You've never missed a postseason kick. Why aren't we talking about kickers the way we're talking about running back contracts?
Well, I think if you look at the kickers, the guy that signed the biggest deal this offseason was Matt Gay. He
Yeah.
signed a huge deal with the Indianapolis Colts. Greg Zerline goes back home. Matt Prater signs the exact same deal that I signed in San Francisco at 38 with his own team. You look at guys then that signed, they just signed for league minimum, right? They're trying to
Yeah.
get the half of the salary back on the salary cap to try to put it in other places. And what I've learned along with the running back position, I mean, there's not one older guy that's been re-signed in free agency as a kicker,
Right.
and I think teams are going to try to go young until they can't. And trust me, I'm following teams pretty closely right now in training camps and their observations. And, you kind of get excited about when reporters write about the observation of kicking competitions, which was never something in July I've been used to like tracking online, but it gives you a little bit of the inside scoop. And then, you can't tell, when I was a player rep, one of the biggest, issues I had is you have this cap number,
Yeah.
and everyone says, oh, it's going to go to the older guys. It's going to go to this position. It's going to go to that position. Well, truly, that's not the case. You have a number and you can't tell a general manager or owner how to spend it.
Right.
And right now in the running back position, I think they deserve a lot of money because they're touching the ball all the time. They are the guys blocking all the time. And I get they get hurt, but like if you're a really good general manager and you can find some guys to complement a guy like Saquon or a Jonathan Taylor, even you had 4 running backs franchise that were not able to get a long-term deal. Now,
Right.
you could say it's a market. Who knows? To me, it's just you can't tell owners how to spend money. But when people's jobs are on the line and you need to win football games and things come down to where people are on the hot seat because of how the preseason went, usually that moves the needle for people. And for me, I think that's going to be the case.
Well, Zach Moss breaking his arm today for the Colts certainly gives Jonathan Taylor a lot more leverage than he had before that. And we don't wish injuries on anybody. We want to be clear. But
Sure.
suddenly, some of Jim Irsay's sort of flippant comments about running back contracts certainly take on a whole new meaning with the guy that if Jonathan Taylor was going to be on the NFL list for this back injury, which he says he doesn't have, all of a sudden, maybe we need to start negotiating a little bit more with Jonathan Taylor.
Well, I think there's a lot of factors that kind of go into every situation. First of all, whether Jonathan Taylor had a back injury or tightness or stiffness
Yeah.
has nothing to do with the guy himself, right? He
Correct.
wants a new contract. He wants to get a new deal. He came into training camp to be around his guys, to not lose $30,000 a day. And I'm sure his back is tight. He's a running back. Like, now all of a sudden he asks for a trade because they're not going to give him a deal. And a team that is going to say, hey, well, we're going to put you in the NFI if you're not going to practice. Well, I get it. I get where you're coming from, Indianapolis Colts, but is that the best way to resolve this?
No.
You know what I mean?
No,
Like,
it isn't. It isn't.
so right. So like for me, it's like, okay, you want to play hardball because he has to get out, and nowadays, like players put things on social media to allow there to be a conversation about what's happening or what's going on, and that's now your voice. When we negotiated the deals in the NFLPA, like these guys that hold out for $30,000 a day, you cannot get that money back. It
It's
used to be in
gone.
the old days. Hey,
Yeah.
we get a deal done. Awesome. See you later. Forget about the fine.
We'll forgive all this
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah.
Now that doesn't happen anymore. And I think now you're seeing more and more guys come in and they're sitting out and holding out in house.
Yeah, it's called holding in now instead of
Yeah.
holding on. I'm here, but I'm just my arm.
And it's vague, right? It's like, hey,
Yeah.
my hamstring hurts a little bit. On my back, like I'm just too tight. I can't go. So, yeah, it's unfortunate what's happening, but I've always come to the school of thought that you can't tell owners and general managers how to spend the money.
Right. And by the way, it is like before we're not trying to pile on the Colts. I want to be clear here, but you have a quarterback who might be starting as a rookie, right? Who didn't play much at Florida. And he has all the wow factor, but again, as you know better than anybody, the wow throws are great, but moving the change throws keep an offense on the field.
Well, let's
So
be
if
honest.
you
He's also a rookie
yeah,
quarterback, right?
correct. Yeah.
And
What's the best thing you can give him to help him
there's
succeed?
gonna be a scale of no matter how talented he is, there's a learning curve for every rookie in the National Football League. And the
Right.
best medicine for a rookie quarterback is a dynamic running game, right? And
Bingo.
then if you look at
Yeah.
how that team is built, Jonathan Taylor's the best player on that football team,
By a mile.
right? So, like, if I were the Colts,
Well, yeah, absolutely best offensive player. Like you make a question, for Shaq
Darius
Leonard
Leonard, yeah,
or yeah,
yeah,
whatever. Like you could go down that road, but like on the offensive side, it's Jonathan Taylor and Quentin Nelson. Like those are the two best
for
players on the
sure.
field. Right.
And to me, like, I think if they can get it settled eventually, and I don't know what this whole running back meeting was about. You haven't heard any rumblings of what have come out of it and how the running
Well,
backs are going to pan together and whatnot. But it just comes down to production. And Jonathan Taylor is one of those guys that's had a lot of high production, has helped a lot of quarterbacks in that offense work in the play action pass. It's been great for the receivers to be able to get it open. So to me, I just look at him as a possible MVP candidate and somebody that knows he's going to get the ball more than he probably has ever gotten it before. And that takes a toll on your body and it cuts down the length of his career.
yeah, and by the way, the Colts, I think, are going to have their seventh or eighth straight different starting quarterback week one, whether it's Gardner Minshew or Anthony Richardson. And the other thing, like on the running backs, we'll move on from this. Like you had this big Zoom meeting. Hey, we all got to stick together, and the Giants threw like an extra couple of million at Saquon. Boom, sign done.
Yeah,
Like
but
like
that
automatically, I'm
I
in.
know, but think about that deal for a minute though. Like that deal was he got $2 million guaranteed, I think.
Yep, yep,
Right? He
yep.
had at least 10 million guaranteed.
Yeah. No, I get
So
it. Like, but I mean, like,
so
but
so
if
that's
the whole thing was, hey, we got to be together on this. We're all, and then automatically take that deal. It's like, well, I guess we're not together.
Yeah, but then if the guys can talk in a meeting all they want to figure out, hey, here's what's being said to me, here's what's being talked about my agent, here's the real market space out there of what's being told. But at the end of the day, every single person in the National Football League has a different personal story. Like if I wanted to go play for
Correct.
league minimum right now, I could, and I'd have
Right.
7 teams sign me tomorrow.
Correct.
But for me, I'm in a position where I played 18 years. I don't have to do that. I've and for these running backs and other players, like everybody has a different fiscal and financial responsibility themselves, but also they have to do what they think is best for their careers. And I think for Saquon, he's coming off an injury a couple years ago. I'm sure he knows exactly how. If they get a deal done and they tell him he's not going to get franchised a year from now, he knows exactly how important training camp is for him in order to stay
Right.
healthy. And then eventually he's going to free agency in 5, 6 months. So for
Right.
him, that might have been a great situation where they got rid of the second franchise tag and he knows he's going to the market in 6 months. And now you have this guy who's motivated, but he's also going to get his money. But he's also knows that for his own body and that beating and pounding that these guys take, they have to go to camp in order to get
Yeah.
it on their body to make sure that they're ready. Because if he misses 4 games, it's the same narrative.
Yeah. By the way, what you said is just true, and people don't understand that. The only way to prepare for the brutality of the season is to get hit a little bit
For
in
sure.
training camp. It gives you that shell, for lack of a better term, of what to expect. One of
And
my
on
favorite.
that point,
Yeah.
like the first 20 days of training camp is
Yeah.
where you get that because then you get
Yeah.
into games and you're not doing that as frequent. You went from 4 preseason games to 3, so now you're getting more playing time in those 3 games as opposed to the first and fourth game you weren't getting any when in the old scheme.
Right.
So to me, like to your point, like that's in these 20, 25 days is where you get your entire body ready and your core of what you're going to take on, and you're going to get hurt. It's just part of the game.
Yeah.
Like you're going to get hit. And some of those hits are harder than others. And I don't know if you watch the quarterback series on Netflix, but
I
like
did.
that's a true indication of what it's like going from a Monday to a Sunday.
Yeah.
And it should give people a better appreciation for what those Monday to Thursday night games look like. And if you have to do 2 in a row, like some teams are
Yeah.
going to have to do, like it's a tall task for some of these guys to get their bodies ready by Thursday.
Yeah. One of my favorite things when people say, "Oh, they go out there. It's one day. It's a job one day a week." I'm like, you have no idea
No
what
idea.
you're talking about.
The
Not a
best these
single
guys are
clue.
ever going to feel was 7 days ago when they
Correct.
walked in the building. Because as soon as they
Correct.
walked in, it's just going to go downhill from there.
it's an inevitable slide down to where you can just manage what you have to manage.
Yeah,
Um, Speaking of managing, one of my favorite lines about kickers when people say it is like, you never think about a kicker until you need one,
yeah.
right? And I feel like it's sort of like a backup quarterback in the sense that you never think about a backup quarterback until your starter goes down. You're like, oh my God, who the hell do we have?
Or your third
Does
string goes down in
well,
our
we'll
case,
get into
right?
that because you
Yeah.
lived that last year. You went through
Yeah,
all of that
it
last year in San
happens.
Francisco.
It's part of
Does
it. You gotta
that
block
bother
the guy.
you though? But does that bother you? Because, like I said, you're going to be top five. You're going to get to 2,000 points. You're top eight all time in accuracy. Never missed a postseason kick. It's like, hey, like this matters. Like look at the games. Look at frickin' the Super Bowl. It was a 3-point game. Look at how close the AFC Championship game was. Like if you can do this thing, it should really be valued.
Yeah, I mean, listen, at the end of the day, it's been a unique experience to say the least.
Yeah.
Conversations that you'd have with people, deals that you'd have in place and get pulled the next day. Again, I can't tell someone how to spend their money. And if they think the best
Right.
route for their team is to go young at the time, then that's their prerogative. I just know that for me, you know, I'm I've I've started training camp 2 weeks ago, which is way earlier than I normally would. Um,
Yeah.
Only because I know that I don't have to worry about a training camp right now. I can get my
Yeah.
schedule and my base so that I'm not in training camp worrying about a team telling me how many reps I'm going to get or what lift I have to do. Like I made my own schedule. So for me, I'm in great shape. I'm kicking really, really well right now. And it's been fun to be able to go out and share those moments with my kids because I think, yeah, would I love to be in a training camp? Sure. Do I think teams need older kickers? Absolutely. I think there's teams out there right now that that either can win their division and get in the playoffs and start their team on a trajectory that makes sense, or there's teams that can actually win a Super Bowl that don't have a kicker.
Yeah.
And everyone's goal as an organization, no matter whether you're negotiating a contract or whether you're sitting in my shoes, is let me go see if I can get younger. Let me see if I can get cheaper. Let me go see if I can find a less expensive version of what we need to win. And that's their prerogative. But I know when my time comes, teams are getting a off kicker that's excited to play a bunch of teams. I've had a lot of conversation with teams, and listen, I'm motivated, I'm excited, and when that time comes, it's going to be a lot of fun.
Literally, how much time would you need? Like from someone says we need, like how quickly are you ready to roll?
So usually in training camp, I knew by day 13 to 15, um, and even sometimes before that, that I was in rhythm and I was ready to play. Again, for me, it's I have the rhythm and timing down by myself, which I think is a huge part of it. Now it's about going in, and I always have a really good routine when I get in a new situation. It's not about worrying about my get off times right away. It's about manufacturing a time of rhythm and then getting faster as you go. So for me, it'll take a couple days to a couple weeks, depending on what the operation and the situation is. But I've played really, really well in the playoffs, and usually I'm pretty pissed off about something.
Yeah.
And for me,
Well,
like
when
I
you
got a
kicked
lot of
that game
circles.
winner when you kicked that game winner in Green Bay a couple of years ago for San Francisco, there was certainly there was a little you had
Yeah,
there.
you know what's funny is like those games of the Green Bay Packers. I've only played in the NFC, so
Yeah.
I've played the Green Bay Packers a lot. They were a huge rivalry of the Bears, and then when I got to San Francisco the last 4 years, that became our rivalry. Truly,
Yeah.
like, yeah, it was Seattle a little bit, no doubt, like in the division. But like the team we played the most was Green Bay. The team that we had to compete against for the NFC title, going to the Super Bowl and things like that, ended up being the Green Bay Packers. So for us, and now even at the time, like you look back having this conversation, the Dallas Cowboys were a rivalry of ours too. Like we played them 2 years in a
Yeah.
row and knocked them out of the playoffs. We played them a couple times in the regular season. It's always a really cool franchise versus franchise history, and I think to be a part of that for me, I just know what that game has meant to me since I've been a rookie in '05.
You mentioned the Cowboys, and you guys have taken them out the last couple of years. I want to get your thoughts on something that we saw last year in the wild card game, where Brett Maher was just gone. Like
Yeah,
he missed what 4 straight extra points. As someone who's been through it, does that hurt you more when you see someone because like kickers to me are almost like offensive linemen. You only notice them when something goes wrong,
sure. I
you
think
know, and
I think from the perspective of his playoff game is one, it was a playoff game, so it was seen by more people. Two, we've all had those games. I had my game against the Arizona Cardinals 4 years ago where I missed
I
three field
remember.
goals in the second half, and
Yeah,
and it wasn't because I wasn't confident. It was just like, oh, that hit a great ball. Why did it do that? And sometimes
yeah,
that happens. Obviously he just got signed by the Denver Broncos, and that's a really good situation for him. And he's got a lot of talent, and that's why he got re-signed, right? I think if you look at how his season went, he was a 90% field goal kicker, and
yeah. It was
one
not like it was
game,
nuts. It was a
one game,
meltdown in front of everybody.
yeah, and one game, unfortunately. But you've seen that at our position for the duration of my career and even more. I mean, Nate Kading, who was one of the best kickers of all time,
Yeah,
he
for the
had a hard
Chargers,
one. Doug Bryan, the Jets
for the
against the Pittsburgh
Jets.
Steelers,
Yeah,
he comes to
Herm
Chicago.
Edwards still talks about that kick. He still
Like,
talks about that kick.
like that, it just happens. Like you have games like that, but there's games where it just has more meaning than others, and usually playoff games have that.
Yeah. Yeah, it was I mean, it got to the point with that play, like, I was watching it like, "Please make this kick, please." I mean, like, you don't wanna see anybody it's very and this can mean something to you because you're a huge golfer. If people don't know that, you're really good. You play in the American Century almost every year. Like, kicking is almost like golf. You have to surrender to the swing and just make a good one and then accept the results, right?
Yeah, but I think golf and kicking are similar because you're going to make mistakes. The
Yeah.
question is, how small are those mistakes? Is it a huge block right out of bounds and you double bogey the hole, or do you block
Happened
it right?
today.
Do
Just
you
happened today, tell you that right now.
do you block it right and miss it wide right? Do you pull it and can you get your misses to be in the middle third of the upright? And I think I never wanted to be the kicker that lived inside any upright ever. I wanted to make sure that my
Yeah.
ball was falling in the middle third. And, I think I had to do that in Chicago because it allowed me to know where I can miss from. And I think there's a big mental side to the game. I think there's a lot of like, if you
Absolutely.
miss one, oh man, I just double bogeyed. It's hole three. Well, there's still 15 holes to go. Well, if you miss the kick in
Yeah.
the first quarter, you better tighten up a little bit and get ready because you're going to need them down the stretch. So I think there's a big mental capacity that goes into that. And, those are the guys that separate themselves from being just a guy to being elite.
Yeah. So we you sort of alluded to this earlier, but let's talk about what happened last year in San Francisco. Do you ever remember a situation like that with the injuries to quarterbacks and I mean the regular season where Brock had to come in and then obviously the NFC Championship game was an absolute disaster. What was it? Okay, let's start here. What did you see in Brock Purdy when he had to come in and play down the stretch of those games? And when did you think, okay, this kid might have something?
Well, if you looked how he played fearless. He
Yeah,
didn't try to do too much. He tried to get the ball out. He's got great recognition of the offense on how to get it to a guy quick with the play that's being called. And I never thought he panicked. You would see him athletically be able to get out of some pressures. Teams try to stack the box and they try to make us one dimensional and have him throw the football. If you look at how that team's built, you have Debo, who's one of the better receivers in the NFL. You have Brandon Ayuk, who I think is probably better than Debo in a different way, right? I think more of a true receiver, whereas Debo is really dynamic with a ball if you get it in his hands really quickly. And both have totally different attributes that can be used by Kyle Shanahan. You see him move them all over. Then you have Christian McCaffrey, you have George Kittle, you have a solid offensive line. I mean, you
a
you
great
can
offensive line,
you
a great
can
offensive
you
line.
can move guys around in that offense and put them in positions for mismatches and call a play where Kyle doesn't have to really like explain to the quarterback why the play is going to dictate where that ball is pretty much going to go versus coverage. So
Yeah,
to me, like when you have that kind of offense and you have a guy like Brock Purdy who can manage it and move the ball around, it just worked, and it worked really well, moving the ball up and down the field. And I think he made a name for himself, and defenses are going to have a little bit more film on him, and he'll study and he'll be around the game and just know the type of dude that he is. And I think the guy's got a lot of talent, but he's also got a lot of upside for those guys, because if he's cheap and he can win, then they can continue to build around him on the offense or defensive side of the football.
So, with all that being said, you go into that NFC Championship game against the Eagles, and he gets hurt right away, like one of the first or second series that you guys were in. At that point, are you just like saying, F me? Like, really? Like, I mean,
Well, we
really?
knew how hard the game was going to be. I mean, first of all, we have to
Yeah.
block the guy, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's where it starts. So we have to
Yeah.
block him. That's on us. They made a great pass rush, and they hurt the quarterback. Good for them. And then the second guy comes in, and obviously we still thought we had a chance. We had a really good defense. Our special teams were playing pretty good. Our offense could run the football pretty well, and at the end of the day, their defense got after us, and they played well, and they made it to the Super Bowl.
Yeah. So, with all that being said, it's a really interesting situation, I think, in San Francisco this year because Brock has been cleared for all practices. They bring in Sam Darnold, who's never had a situation like he has in San Francisco, as you alluded to. McCaffrey, wide receivers, great offensive line and defense. And it feels like the forgotten guy in all of this is Trey Lance, which is
Yeah.
really weird because he's the guy they gave up 3 number 1 picks for. And when they did that, you guys knew because you were with him at the time that he hadn't played a lot, so he's going to need reps. And he got hurt last year, and now it feels like, okay, well, if Brock's here, he's the guy. Sam might beat him out in camp, and Trey Lance is, I don't know. It just feels like they've moved on from him so quickly.
I don't know that they moved on from him. I just think that, it's never really been a full throttle opportunity for Trey, from just sitting around and being able to have the room and get a full season under his belt, and knowing
Yeah,
that, if you do make mistakes, it's going to happen, and it's all right, right? But like, that team is built to win and win now, right? So I don't know
correct.
that I don't think the team forgot about him. I don't think the team is in a development phase if that's what they think Trey's in, right? I think Trey can start. I think Trey was able to do that. I think the offense is a little bit different with um, Purdy and Darnold versus Trey Lance, and how it would have to operate. But I think at the end of the day, like, there's a reason they picked him number 3. I think he's got a lot of talent. It's just been injuries and some things that have kind of derailed um, some of that early on in his career. And, listen, Trey is a workhorse. That guy is in the building all the time. He's doing recovery. He's studying. You'll see him out throwing extra. I mean, the guy is a stud. And then, you hear the reports of them trying to trade him. They did pay Sam Darnold $5 million to come in and be a backup,
Yeah.
right? So I think that was if somebody does get hurt, they now have somebody that can come in that has. Well, first of all, he was a top 3 pick, I believe, as well,
2018, he
right?
was the 3rd overall pick behind Baker
So
and Saquon.
so at the end of the day, like, they have another guy that's really talented in there. That if the same situation happens like in the NFC Championship, they have 3 quality guys that can go in and start. And if you look at Kyle's praise for him and what he said about Steve Young and comparing him to Steve Young, that's pretty high praise for a guy like Sam Darnold, who's got a lot of talent. So they got a really good situation with depth there, and I think that'll help them in the long run.
In your opinion, is it Brock's job to lose?
I don't know. I mean, if you look at the reports online, I think he's getting like 44% of the reps, which I'm sure they're trying to build up his tolerance for throwing and give
Right.
him enough reps to be able to see defenses and get back in a rhythm. But I think all the reports that you saw off season would point to Brock being the starter.
Last thing on your former team, because I don't want to dwell too much on this. Is the Nick Bosa situation a big concern in your opinion?
I don't think it's a big concern. I just think that the guy's the best defensive player in football. And, I think Nick has a lot of leverage. I think he has the ability to wait because he's going to get a monster deal. And the $30,000 a day that he would get fined is going to be very
Yeah.
minimal to,
Chump change.
to the biggest high. He should be the highest paid defensive player of all time in NFL history.
Yeah.
And I know Nick, Nick's a game changer. He's the guy that defense needs next to Fred Warner. Hargrave, getting him in there in the interior helps next to Eric Armstead. It helps the DBs out a lot. So, Nick is the face of the franchise, and it'll get done eventually. I think it's just a matter of, it's these things that take a while to get the language right, to get the numbers right, to somebody to give in to their negotiations to make it somewhat team friendly. But at the end of the day, that's a deal that has to get done because he's a huge part of that defense.
Yeah. All right. So for people that don't know, you and I have been friends for a long time, and we've had these conversations not in a recorded situation, just you and me talking. And you've been to two Super Bowls, Super Bowl 41, Super Bowl 54, came up on the short end of each one. Which one hurt more, Super Bowl 41 or Super Bowl 54?
Well, I think 54 hurt the most because we had a 10-point lead with 5 minutes to go in the game and get beat by, I don't know, 15 or something wild.
11 points,
It
31 to
was
20.
it felt like it was getting beat by 30.
Yeah.
And you have a 3rd and 16 play that you give up. Then we miss a deep ball down the middle.
Oh,
We played a
yeah,
great
that
game.
was
We just
tough.
didn't finish it,
Yeah.
and the Kansas City Chiefs did, and good for them, right? They kept it around. The
Yeah.
defense kept it close enough. Um, I think the game that hurt the most out of my entire career would have been the NFC Championship against the Rams.
Yep.
You're up
10-point lead in
10
the fourth
points
quarter.
again. In the beginning of the fourth quarter, we dropped the interception, which it happens. Fine. They go down and score. They make it a 3-point game. And then, we lose on a game winning field goal. So to me, like that stretch with that, I was just with some teammates and old teammates and people. And I said to them, the only thing that I wish that team for the last 4 years, that team deserved to win a Super Bowl. And we just didn't finish. We could have played in
Yeah.
4 straight Super Bowls
Correct.
or NFC championships. And that's how good that team was. But we just didn't finish when we needed to finish the most. And that will always hurt me as a player just because I know how hard it is to win in the NFL. But it hurts for my teammates because it was such an awesome locker room. And not to say the guys won't get together, but usually when you have a championship and you win, like no one brings back the NFC championship teams. Like they just don't,
Correct.
right? Like,
Right.
we're going to do the 1985 Bears again in Chicago, and good for them.
Yeah.
They won a Super Bowl. But at the end of the day, like nobody remembers NFC championships. They remember Super Bowl winners. And it would have been fun to be able to come back as a group and talk about it and reminisce. And it's just going to have to happen in a different capacity. And, so for me, they all hurt. They just all hurt differently.
Yeah, the only sport where you celebrate runners up is or college basketball. Hey, you made it to a Final Four. Congratulations.
Yeah,
It's
right.
just, it's so bizarre. Like I get it, it's an accomplishment. But like in every other sport, you don't care about third and fourth place, but somewhere in college basketball, Final Four, great accomplishment. It's very weird.
Yeah, it's also tough whenever you lose the NFC Championship or Super Bowl. Be like, oh, look how far you got. I'm like, yeah, that's awesome.
No.
I got 3 extra paychecks, but I got nothing to
Yeah.
show for it.
Yeah.
But I will say, like, from a legacy perspective for me, like there's a lot of people who don't get to play in those games.
Correct.
And I've played in a lot of meaningful football games. I've played in 2 Super Bowls. Listen, Adam Vinatieri's played in 6 of them. I think Gostowski's played in 6 or 7 of them. If you get with the right quarterback in the right situation, like you can go like Patrick Mahomes is going to go a lot. So the AFC better get ready to knock him off the top because he's the guy to beat. And, you now have Aaron Rodgers, you have Josh Allen, and you have Joe Burrow. Like that's going to be a fun playoff run to watch. Those are some fun games. Trevor Lawrence is getting better.
Lamar Jackson,
Lamar
Justin
Jackson.
Herbert.
Yeah. Like it's
Joe Burrow. Like
yeah.
I don't know how you feel about it as a player, but I don't think and like this is, I really like your perspective here. Cause as you said, you're played 18 seasons. I don't think I've ever seen a larger gap in top quarterbacks from one conference to the other than the AFC over the NFC.
Right? Yeah. And I don't know if that's because of how they just fell in the draft, right? Yeah. Or if it was just a matter of like the AFC teams are getting beat up so much for so long that they're able to get the right draft picks for that, right?
Yeah.
So it sometimes it's luck, a lot of it's evaluation, but if you look at the AFC quarterbacks, I mean, they are stacked, and it's stacked in a lot of different divisions too, which is kind of fun because it should promote some really good playoff matchups and or some really good like week 16, 17, 18 flexes at the end of the NFL season.
You mentioned Mahomes, and I just want to along these lines. Is there one guy that you've sort of watched from the sidelines and said more than any other guy, how is he doing that?
You know, it's funny. Like he's a football player.
Yeah,
He's not a
yeah,
robot. He's
yeah.
not like he's athletic enough to escape the pocket. He's smart enough to be able to put himself in a situation where he can use what it's God-given gift of an arm. I mean, watching him throw in pregame warm-up 80 yards on a rope is just
Arm arrogance is
ridiculous.
what I call it. Arm
It's
arrogance.
unbelievable. I mean, I don't think that the game has ever seen that before.
Yeah,
And I played against Brett Favre. I played against a lot of really top end Hall of Fame talent, and I don't know that they ever had his arm strength, but it's really amazing to watch him. Like if you watch the Netflix documentary, and I thought the
yeah.
coolest thing that you would almost think that it was like cocky and arrogance, but it's really like a confidence, and his team bonds around him to understand that, hey, we're never out of this. We're always in the
Yeah,
game. We can always make a
yeah.
play. We can always get back in this. And you've seen that a lot. Like they've been down a ton of points early on. I think they were down 21-0 to the Houston Texans. They fake a
24 to
punt.
nothing.
They fake a
24 to
punt.
nothing.
They fake a
Yeah,
punt in the first half, and it totally changed the game, and they get blown out.
yeah.
They're
I
down
mean,
24
my favorite
points
thing about that
going to
game,
halftime.
I think they outscored him like 51-10 after they were down 24 points. It was
Wild,
insane.
right?
Yeah, and I
Um,
think he's the only quarterback since 1950, and I'm not a big believer that wins and losses are a quarterback stat, but his teams have a winning record when they're down by 10 points. They're
yeah,
down
and I
by 10
think
points. He has a winning record.
Yeah, but I think that's like that uniqueness of that offense and Andy Reid, like the
Yeah,
weapons they have, the guys they have, and the ability. Like even if you go back to like the AFC Championship game, like they score with 30 seconds to kick a field goal. Now, granted,
yeah,
the guy hits them out of bounds, gives them an extra 15 yards, but still, like they have the ability to get down and get points within 30 seconds from,
yeah.
a touchback or an inside the 20 tackle and kickoff return, and that just doesn't happen all the time with every team.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier the Hall of Fame and how important that is to you. Obviously, to me, the Hall of Fame is a reflection of your excellence at your position. A Super Bowl is a recognition of the team doing something together. What would mean more to you, winning a ring or someday putting on a gold jacket?
I think they both go hand in hand. Truly, like it for me and a kicker.
But
It's really
there's
I
so
know, but
few pure kickers in the hall,
think about
Robbie.
this
There's
though.
so
Like
few.
I know, but think about this, right? I've made one Pro Bowl in my career. I've been
Yeah.
leader in the NFL in field goals, points, whatever. I've been a 10-time alternate.
Yeah.
But played on some bad teams at the time when I was having a really good season. And usually you don't get voted in the Pro Bowl when that happens. I think the other part of it too is it's a legacy piece. So if you look at the Hall of Fame and not many specialists get in, and I know how difficult it might be to do that, but I do know that the body of work that I put in was the most consistent, um, probably there's been over that long period of time. And there's a lot of guys that I've looked up to, like Jason Hanson would be one, Adam
Yeah.
Vinatieri, Phil Dawson, John Carney, guys that I know that have been
Phil,
had,
that's a great name. Phil Dawson does not get mentioned enough
and he
for his
should, but
career.
again, like
Yeah.
it goes back to like, okay, he was in some really bad teams in
Terrible.
Cleveland where he was the offense.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like no one would give him the respect he deserved because the team wasn't winning.
Yeah.
So for me, like it's a very difficult conversation to have because I feel like you have to look at the legacy first. And like I said, Phil Dawson, I think he play in a Super Bowl with the Niners or they lose? I think they
I
lost,
think,
right? To the
yeah, I think they
Giants.
lost. Yeah.
So like
Yeah.
here's a guy who plays for 19 years and had an unbelievable career, and you would hope that he gets talked about in that way because he deserves it, right? Like John Carney, same thing. Vinatieri will go in for sure. All the big kicks he made in the playoffs, all-time leading NFL scorer. Like, the guy's just got an awesome resume. But for me, like, I think if I can win a Super Bowl, I think it helps with my case to get in the
But
NFL,
if you
NFL Hall of
could
Fame.
only pick one, if you could only pick one,
I mean, obviously, I'd pick the Hall of Fame,
yeah,
and I think there's a lot to that, right? I mean, I think the gold jacket itself carries a lot of weight long term, more so than maybe a Super Bowl victory. But
yeah,
I think the cool part about a Super Bowl victory is it's a team. That's a team win, and that's what I love
yeah,
about it. And go back to your early conversations about positions and how teams are built and things like that. Like, you know, if you go back and look at the teams who have won the Super Bowl, they probably have had holes in their team for sure, but it's probably the most balanced across the board they've ever been.
yeah.
So some of that's lightning in a bottle, but the specialists play a huge part. You go back and look at the Giants Super Bowl against the Patriots in Indy. Like, Steve
Yeah.
Weatherford pins them inside the 10 how many times, making Tom Brady have to go the whole length of the field to try to score
Yep.
points. On that defense, that's hard to do, right?
Yeah.
So for me, like, I just know the importance of our positions. And I know that legacy is a big play for me. And hopefully one day it happens. And if not, at least I did everything I could when I was playing on the field or off the field to give myself a chance to be in that position.
Toughest field to kick on.
Oh,
Because Pittsburgh gets beat up. Obviously, Chicago comes into this a lot. FedEx
Arizona's
Field has
really
had all
bad.
kind of issues.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Arizona's really bad. Vegas field was really bad last year at the end of the season. I'll be interested to see. They do something similar to the Arizona Cardinals. I'll be interested to see how they handle that for the Super Bowl. I figured that field was going to be pretty soft during the Super Bowl, just because of the time of the year of growing it and drying it out and whatnot. I mean, Pittsburgh's hard. Cleveland's hard. Baltimore can be tough. FedEx Field's probably one of the worst fields, I'd say.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a handful of them. It's not easy to kick in the NFL, but that's why you played for 18 years. You figured it out.
Favorite place to kick?
I love kicking in Lambeau. Love it.
Really?
Absolutely love it. I love the history. I love the long tunnel. I love walking out to, like, this huge moment. Like,
Yeah.
it's a historic place that a lot of people have had to just grace the field and play, and think about the people that have played there before and the rivalries and the frozen tundra of, like, the playoffs. Like, it's so cool for me to be able to say that, like, I've played there week one and I've played there in 0 - 8 degree weather. And
Yeah.
and everyone's like, oh man, that must have been so tough. It was awesome. Yeah, it sucked. Don't get me wrong, but it's 3 hours of work. Like, you go and figure it out. But best atmosphere by far is New Orleans. They got an awesome group of people that are rowdy. Night games are way wilder there.
Yeah.
Minnesota is pretty wild too. Their fans are great no matter the time of the day. They're awesome. The school chant's pretty neat. I'm trying to think where else. Yeah, Lambeau's one of my favorites. I love kicking in Lambeau.
And you recently, the last couple of years, have sort of become an internet sensation because of your pregame and halftime. Like, you're out there kicking. You do not care whether it's the Cowboys cheerleaders or somebody else lining up somewhere. You're like, get out of my way. This is my routine. This is what I do.
Well, it's funny because I when the first one happened against the Cowboys in the playoffs, I literally looked
Yeah.
around before, like I normally do, to pick a side where I'm going to kick,
Yeah.
where the national anthem might not happen or entertainment's going to come my way. And somehow I was in the middle of the field kicking, and I just heard, like, these pom poms. Like, are you kidding me? So then I was like, well, I'm in the middle of the field. I know they're going down the hash. Like, I'm just going to keep kicking.
Yeah.
Who cares? And then it just kind of became like a thing. Like, I didn't even think about it. I just kind of warmed up where I had space. And the only one I did on purpose is I was warming up, and then the LA Rams came out during the
Yep.
NFC Championship game, and their kickoff team was literally sitting right in front of me. And I was like, hey guys, one or two more and I'll be out of your way. No big deal. And they refused to move. I was like, well, screw you. Like, if you're going to get hit,
Yeah.
this is going to hurt. And I don't really care, Yeah, I don't know. It's weird. It's kind of taking a life of its own, but like, hey,
Yeah.
I got work to do. So if you're in the way, that's just part of the business, and let's get this game going so I can make some field goals and hopefully win the football game.
And what's the old line? Lead, follow, or get out of the way. So
Yeah,
those
right.
those are those are the three options. And you've been leading for a lot of years. Listen, man, always good to catch up with you. Good luck this week in the tournament, and hopefully you'll find the right team for you. Because there's no doubt in my mind you'll be kicking this year. But for your sake, and obviously what we've talked about, I hope it's the perfect situation to get you where you need to go.
Yeah, it'll work out the way it's supposed to. And if for some reason that doesn't happen, I'll be doing a lot more of these with you and having some fun in this side of the world, you know? So
Winner, winner, chicken dinner.
let's
Either
do
way.
this. Yeah. Well, it's good hanging with you as always.
All right, brother. Be good.
Thanks.